me, Stefan Ljungqvist.
I'll jump in here.
Yes.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for showing up. Dzień dobry. It's an early Saturday morning. So as she said, my name is Stefan Ljungqvist, and I'm going to try today to give you a little bit of insight on how we are working and what brought me there into this special way of working. So who am I? Well, I've been making games for pretty much whole my life. Started with Spectrum 48K, VIC-20, Commodore 64, and then the Atari ST, where I was part of a group that was quite notorious for pirate copying. But I was a young boy then, so but we learned a lot. So I started coding assembler. I suck at coding, sorry for the language. So I come from an artist family, so I'm a little bit better in terms of creativity. So illustration, animation, and music. So I started figuring out, and partly also my friends told me that it's better that you do graphics than code, because they have to clean up after me. Also, I love dogs. So you see my little Sith Lord up there. It's a Boston Terrier. I have two of them. They're awesomely and nice. I did Kung Fu for about 15 years, full contact. So that's why I think if you look at Biomutant, you will understand why that little furry creature knows how to move very agile and, more importantly, how to fight. Also, I'm a gamer. I play a lot of games. Maybe I told you that I've been doing games for almost 25 years professionally after that. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So let's see if I can press that. So what am I doing now? Yeah, we said that a little bit earlier, and I will just show you something from the game if you're not familiar with it. The game is called Biomutant. It's an open world RPG where you play as a mutated furry animal. Easiest way to describe it is a post-apocalyptic Kung Fu fable. You play as an animal, you know Kung Fu and fight really well. And the world you're playing is post-apocalyptic, but not in the sense that it was destroyed by a nuclear blast, but you're actually playing as the world is dying, and it will show when you're playing. So let's have a look at that if you didn't have the opportunity to see it yet. Yeah, so as you can see, there's a lot of crazy idea in this game. And this is what I'm going to talk about, how we actually managed to do these. It's a brainchild of mine and a friend of mine called Jäger, but we have an awesome team of super talented people that are working to realize this vision, which is the most important thing. So how did I get there? Like I said, I've been working with games professionally for almost 25 years, so let's say more than 20 years. My role has always been a mix between art and creative design, animation, but also management. So why am I doing all of these things? So when we started out, I wanted to take control over my own destiny. That means that if you're just a creator, people can make decisions that will change the course of your future, and you didn't have a say in it. So for me, it was more about trying to be part of those decision makings that would actually limit or enhance your way to be creative. So for me, it's about creative freedom. So if that also involves then the financial side of running a studio, for example. So I've been part of co-founding 5 development studios in video games and other types of games. The last one is then Experience 101. And I say the last one because this is going to be my final time starting a studio. I'm 45 years now. So I'm hoping that Experiment 101 is going to be that last journey that it gives me that creative freedom that I'm looking for. And it looks like it. So how did we start the studio? Yeah, as I said, I've been doing this for a long time and was fortunate enough to get an old friend of mine giving us total freedom in creating whatever game we wanted. And it sounds like, yeah, you were a lucky bastard. But like I said, it takes you a while to get to that point. Yeah, I worked on a lot of games. I will show you a few. Maybe you recognize this game, Just Cause, by the brilliant studio Avalanche Studios. So I worked there for almost 11 years with my friends building up that studio. I left for about 3 years ago to go back to hands-on development because, as I said, I'm a hands-on developer. You might also recognize this game. It was the last game I worked on. It's Mad Max. So we worked with Warner Brothers there. So now you might think that I'm just a AAA developer, but I also worked with indie development, team sizes from 3 people, just me and 2 friends. Like a hobby project, we did a MOBA, crossed with Diablo, which is one of my all-time favorite games. It's called Dead Breed, which got about 1 million players at the maximum, which became kind of crazy for me. As I said, we were just 3 people. But we learned a lot in that journey. So I'm going to move on a little bit faster because I know that we have limited time, even though that we're a little bit late. So another thing to know about me, that I'm a writer, and I published 7 books so far that was published in 7 countries. And I did a lot of other types of games before I finally got back to video games and working with that. So I did tabletop games, pen and paper RPGs, metal miniatures, even sculpted a little bit there. So let's talk a little bit about like this balance between management, if you want to use that, and creativity. So like I said, when we started our first studio, we had it's me and a friend that is now head of publishing of Paradox, if you know that company. So at that time, the company I was working for before, I just came home and my 3rd son was just born. I lifted him up from the crib and he was just crying. So because he didn't recognize me. And what I want to tell about that is that I was working quite a lot. I always worked a lot. And that's, again, when you work with something that you're so passionate about, you have to make sure that you have also life balance. So as you can see here, I think budget, it's also about budgeting your passion. It's budgeting your time. It's budgeting what you're thinking of. It's budgeting your emotions, if you're a family or friends, to make sure that you also get some input, not only output. And I've been quite bad at that, to be honest, over the course of the years. So I'm trying to be better now. But this is also, as I said, Biomutant is a true passion project. I put a lot of heart and soul into the other games as well, but you have to be careful now. So when we started that studio, I said I quit, and I got the brilliant idea together with my friend to start our own studio instead of having a job, and that was even more crazy. So in the beginning, we had no money, so me and my wife scrambled for coins to buy potato. And we also had washable diapers. And my advice with that, if you're an indie developer, there's always a cost, right? If you start out making games and you don't consider, I live at home and I eat noodles, well, it's not really for real. There's always a price to be paid somewhere. And I think as soon as you come to that point when you realize, yeah, I want to work with games, you have to move to the real world as soon as possible. That's my advice. And that's what we did, and we did it the hard way. So at Avalanche, it was pretty much the same thing for me. So I'm skipping here a lot of years, many years. Like I said, I've been part of co-founding five studios. And for about 4 or 5 years ago, my wife asked me, do you really think that this is fun right now? And I led a project with 55 people, all awesome, talented developers. That's why I go to work every day, because they surprise me with their fantastic work. But the question she asked me was quite simple for me to answer, and it was no. And that was just an answer for me personal, and a wake-up clock to think about my future and what I wanted to do with it. So as I said, I'm 45. At Avalanche, games takes between 2 and 5 years. So let's say it was a 5-year game that I was going to make next. Probably I would just have 2 more games or something like that. So I wanted to go back and do this a little bit differently, and that's why we started Experiment 101. The name also gives you an insight in what we're trying to do. Experiment is that we want to prove something that's unknown, or making a point in that things can be done in a different way. But also then it's a paradox, because 101, it's the basics. So like I said, I've been doing this for quite some time. So the design process, as game developers, this has always been really hard for us. I mean, if you are an architect, you don't build a house without plans. You don't send 40 carpenters or whatever to build that house before you actually thought it through. And it's really difficult. Like I said, I know a lot of people over the course of my life as a developer and as a game designer and creative director, that this is one of the most difficult things. I mean, we have a grasp on tech. We have a grasp on art now. We have a grasp on sound. We have a grasp on animation, but we're still struggling to find the process of balancing technical savviness, management, when it comes to dealing with these soft issues. Because how can you design fun? But my talk today is not about giving you that silver bullet on how to design fun. It is more about how do we not waste time, and can we be better in structuring the creative process. So as I said, I think for me, games is passion. You have to pour a little bit of heart and soul into this. Otherwise, the game will, if you don't like it, nobody will like it. But also keep in mind, if you're designing for yourself, make sure that you are not the only one that's going to like this game. And what I mean by that is, again, going back to reality, making money from your game means that you can make another game. So for me, it's not about the money, it's about the creative freedom and continuing this journey. So I'm going to give you a little bit of, I don't know, advice, but something that I learned. So what I said, over the course of 25 years, you make a lot of mistakes. So maybe you can get some ideas from this, and maybe you don't have to make exactly the same mistakes that we did. So this is a process that I'm mentoring at some schools, but also to some studios that I'm currently involved in as a mentor, advisor, and investor. So I didn't speak about that. That's for something for another day. So this is something I call the 1-3-6 process. And it's quite easy. You can also be 2, 9, 2, 6, 12. So the units are maybe it's months, but it doesn't have to be. You can divide by 2 and multiply by 2 or 4, but it's just going to take you a longer time. So the first phase is about prototyping. It's about finding that stickiness. So the way that we work is the first month, we don't have any design at all on paper. I will probably say that many times. So we have a creative vision. In the Biomutant case, it came from me and my colleague Grege. And then we found 2 other guys that worked with us to try to realize this in a playable format. And my advice is, like, after that, let's say 1 month, as an example, if you don't have something that feels sticky, and it both comes to the actual playable prototype and the concept that it feels unique, you should probably just start over again. Why am I saying that? Because some of those problems you're having in the stage 1, you will probably then spill into stage 2. And remember what I said, if you're living in the real world, it's not only about you and the game, it's about time, it's about money. And if you think that you're running a risk of working on a game 2 years for completion, make sure that you feel personally that it's worthwhile your time. That's my advice. So that means, like, for me, I'm trying not to do a Me Too game. At least we're trying to bring something new, and I hope it shows in Biomutant. It definitely was one of the things that we tried to do with Just Cause. And I think we succeeded. I think personally, obviously, it's a great game, all three of them. And it took us a lot of energy, passion, and no fear mentality to make those games. So the second stage is realize. So we're trying to set the bar of the total game experience for the player. This is also a very important stage because now you're actually trying to think about the meta of the gameplay. I will touch upon that. And trying to stabilize your vision. It's not, you have your stickiness, you think, and you're trying to figure out how to structure this into a complete game experience for the player. So that's 3. So usually, for me, in my experience, it takes 3 times as long as trying to stick with that first phase. So multiplied by 3. So did you spend 2 months on the first one? Yeah, figure it out. So that's why I'm saying, like, try to gauge your process and be realistic if you feel that you have problems. So go back, cut, and rinse, repeat. After 3, you have 6. So then we start actually making the game. And now we also know a little bit more about how long does it takes it as a team. Do we need more people? Are we weak in art? Do we need more coders? What's our problem as individual beings? Not like reading on the internet how you make games. You have to figure out who are you in the team. At Avalanche, we ran more than 3 teams at the same time. So obviously you cannot run every team or every project in the same way because there's different people there. There's a different mix. And in our industry, you have that challenge of balancing creativity with technical and more structural things, which is super difficult. So let's move on. So this is usually how I start. So we do what I call a one-pager. You see that I scrambled the text here for Biomutant. It's by purpose. So there's a couple of features here that might not be in the game. They might, but I don't think so because we added maybe 10 other ones. So that's why I scrambled this. So we're trying to, like, probably you heard the concept of a one-pager before, and a lot of people do it in text. As I said, I'm fortunate enough to be able to visualize things. So obviously I'm going to try to spark some ideas into your head. And for me, it's always been about selling because, as I said, that earns you the creative freedom. And also in your team every day, it doesn't matter if you're indie developer, 2 people, you still have to sell your ideas to your friend. If you're 50 people, if you're 100 people and work with a big publisher, believe me, you have to sell this a lot. And you have to convince people about your ideas. So this is how we start. It's as short description as possible. So you see that the text in the beginning is kind of explaining the vision of what you're going to do. And then the bullet points, it's actually what the player is going to do. So that's the focus. So how do you structure this? Sometimes I use this. So this can be interesting. It can be called the peel onion or the bullseye process. So this is helpful for you as a developer to structure the way you think about the game and what's important. So at the center of the bullseye, you have what you think is most important to the game. And then you have a range of features or experiences for the player. I would say no more than 4. And you try to explain them. And you see on the right-hand side, this is the first one I did for Biomutant. And it still holds up. So what this means, like when we go through development, we will measure our new features or any new stupid ideas that we have towards this bullseye. And for example, if we come up with something that then doesn't go in the seamless combat, maybe we don't do it. If we come up with a new idea that feels really good and it goes up against seamless combat, maybe we add it and then we remove something in the 4th circle. I think you get the process. So this is something that a lot of people forget about. Maybe you do not forget about these things, but I see it a lot. And it's what I call the meta gameplay loop. So as a developer, I think, and especially for us that are making like a game that should be sticky for a long period of time. So I'm not really talking about games that are 20 minutes, but systemized design games. For example, Candy Crush is a good example of a great meta, for example. So it's about making the player think about decisions and challenges over time. So it's not only while playing it. We're going to try to make the player think about strategies, about tactics. If your game lacks depth, I promise you that you will probably run into problems. So try to take this in consideration as early as possible. And if you decide to not think about these matters, then you actually took the decision. So that's cool. But I recommend that when you're making a game, try to get people think about your game more than just like playing it for 5 minutes and say, so this is also about bringing those elements in at the start of the game. So that's also a full day's speech based on my experience. So structuring is very important. As I said, for me, I'm a chaotic developer. So this is why I came up with all of these means to structure my work and try to explain it to my friends that are also chaotic developers, especially in Experiment 101, but they're awfully talented. So this is an example of from Biomutant again. Everything is scrambled because, like I said, might change. But these are all real examples. So as you see, there's a flow from top to bottom. And it's not about like quests or anything like that. It's about the structure of the game in terms of feature set. When we introduce features, why? When we introduce things in the game where you're actually using these features, or like your creative toolbox as a player. So trying to get the sense of the scope. And most important here, and we will come to planning shortly, is that you can then use those small boxes when you're planning, because they each like represent something in the game that is important or tangible, and it needs to be tangible in terms of planning to realize that vision. And then we can cut the box. I also use some other means for this, if you know mind maps or mind managers, where you can fold these out. So for example, if one box is combat system or melee combat system, you can fold that out and get more information in detail if you're actually the guy that works with that. But at Experiment 101, we don't really use a lot of documentation, as I said. We use really talented developers. We don't have meetings. We don't have producers. We don't have leads. So we all work together to iterate upon the feature. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to see things in my head as movies, for example, since I'm a very visual guy. But I never met anyone that is able, including myself, to foresee how a game feels. And as a gamer, that's more important. So try to just iterate. And also, like I said before, you are not making the game for yourself. Partly you are, but maybe other people have really good ideas about how to make it cool or feel better. And can you afford to miss out on that? You should ask you that question. So here's actually the same thing, but for quests or missions or structure in a level-based game, I assume. So you see the yellow dots, they are connecting points for when the game is branching out. So I wrote quest, but for us, it's not only about quests, it can be about the structure of the game. So if you're making, again, like I just said, a level-based game, you can think about levels branching off. And what are the conditions of these? So this is actually just an excerpt from this. The yellow points and the numbers, you see, if you don't see it between their small numbers in the white boxes, they also have like a fold-out structure and explains what's going on there. Sorry about the scrambling, but I had to do that. So script writing, as I said, I'm a writer, so I have huge respect for writing in games because it's really difficult. And what I mean by that is like most games that have a great story are kind of linear. For me as a game developer, I'm trying to give you as much freedom as possible in terms of interactivity. Otherwise, I can write books or, I don't know, maybe a movie. So a great game like The Last of Us, for example, has a really good story, but I think you get my point. So for me personally, it's more about you as a player and what you do, and your actions should change your experience as much as possible. So it's about writing voice with control. So I have a few means of doing this. So for example, when I write for our game, again, this is from Biomutant, I'm actually writing in a software that automatically converts this into a voice. So it's text to voice, because that's how the player will experience your story. Also here you see in the example, again, we came up with a syntax where I immediately in the writing can control some aspects of the game. If you see here's dialogue choices and the numbers there I set to control the alignment, for example, here. This is not the only tool that I have. We also have a visual scripting system that is quite advanced in terms of the depth of the scripting system, but it's a visual scripting system. As I said, I'm visual, so it allows me to quite easy structure both dialogue quest system and other actions that trigger manual experiences for the player. Moving on. So when you write a script, as I said, I'm more the creative type, and this is an example from the actual voice recording that we did for Biomutant. So the team, we have a really good system for handling both voice and text. You have to have that in terms of localizing. We're a very small team, so we're trying to make this really, really effective, and we had. Then I was going to do a directed voice recording in London. And when you're working with people, again, you have to make sure that it goes as smooth as possible. So I was expecting output from our system in a way that I could work with the actor. But once we got the output, and I'm going to direct this at 9 a.m, and I was away on that evening before, I got the script, and it was actually in alphabetical order from file names. So that's kind of hard to record with an actor to get some kind of sense of what you're doing. So in the middle of the night, I restructured this to make some sense. And you see an example here. Most importantly, what you see on the left-hand side, it's already the voice files, right? Remember what I said, when I write, I put already the speaking voice in the game, but it's more about systemizing. So that means that we already have everything in the game. And once we get iterations on the voice, it's like 2-click import, and you get real voices. More importantly, also, you get a better understanding for how many files you have, how long they are, what's required. And you're already systemizing there. So again, going back to the topic of the speech, you're balancing the creativity. You're trying to give yourself a box in terms of not being that writer that sits by his desk, some remote place, writes things and leave it to someone else. So we're integrating this as much as possible in our process. I'm moving on then to show you some examples, and I'm going to go through this really quick. As I said, I'm a creator, a designer, but this will all be spreadsheets. So here's an attribute data. Biomutant is a role-playing game. So as I said before, I'm a tabletop role-playing game designer from the beginning. So you have to figure out how to balance your data. Might seem as a logical thing, but I've seen a lot of games that fail on this, or they do this manually. They put in numbers in the editor. I've seen everything from that and in between. This is how we do it. So you see, it's a lot of math. I automated that process. I scramble things here again because they are my assumptions on when I measure. So what's a point of health in relation to a point of damage, for example? And it's up to you to do that math for yourself. On the right-hand side, you also see what happens with these scores when the player levels up. This is more examples, and this is maybe more interesting. So every character in our game has a lot of data. This means that I can kind of control it by just entering numbers or behaviors in this spreadsheet. And there's a one-click import to the game, and it changes everything without no programmer, no other developer have to do anything. And I'm a great advocate of this. You can, in this example from Biomutant, you will see some of the characters that were in the demo that is now playable on Poznań Game Arena, if you want to try that out on the show floor. So again, you see all of the stats on the right-hand side. You see how that enemy actually can level up. You see how I can actually control how it sounds like. I can actually control which behavior modules, and I can combine them in any way I want. In our game, you can also control things like morphing, scaling, automatically by using this type of documentation. I can speak, again, I hold some workshops of this that takes 3 days, so let's not do that. So there's another data sheet that I use to equip characters. So every rig in our game has sockets where you can actually equip things. And I'm not only talking about weapons in the hands. I'm talking about everything from, in our game then, what kind of fur, what's the pattern on the fur, how big or small is he, and more importantly, what is he wearing? So what kind of equipment? And we will touch briefly about that too. So that means like I can make a system where the enemies kind of scale with your progression as a player. So now that character becomes more difficult. If I want to add a character, I just insert it here and I call on some data modules and the character's in the game. I give him a name, an object name. Remember what I said? I started with programming, even though I suck at it. I think the object class structure is very valuable for you as a designer. So this is a good example, I think, of being effective. And that's why you can be a smaller team and you have a lot of structure. So smart objects. We have a lot of objects in our game. We call them statics, which is completely stupid because static means that it doesn't do anything. I don't know why we came up with that name. It's probably me. But they are smart objects. So they have some kind of behavior built in. So for example, a loot box, it's a simple thing. So for us, every smart object, we say it's interactable. If there's a loot box, it calls automatically on a drop table. And I set like how common are items, and we'll look at items very soon. I can control music here, adaptive sound. So if you come into a trigger area that I can set the size of here, I can start with a stinger, and then it goes into a looping system. And when you come near that object, it does another stinger. Nobody has to do anything except I control this in a data structure. And this is also very important because if some of my classes here are wrong, all of those types are wrong in the game. So it also enables you to kind of QA your game more efficiently in regards of comparing it to make everything manual. And I'm an open world developer. So for example, Biomutant is 4x4 kilometers. So there's a lot of content in that game. So you have to be smart. You can't place like 4,000 doors manually and hope that they work. Yeah. And here's also another example. I can give XP, I can give gold rewards, I can trigger quests for the characters, for example. In that I can say, this character has quests, and it will pull from a specific quest pool. So the possibilities are endless. Like I said, I'm just showing you also part of the spreadsheet. It actually extends to the right, all of these. Yeah, so you see this now, it starts to become really crazy. So these are all the items, an example from our game. It's about 1,000 of them already. And that's due to the fact that in our game, all the weapons, for example, are craftable. So we take the bits, we give them individual stats, we give them a commonality, and also then I can call upon these to craft things in real time in the game. So when you play our demo, you will see that all of the characters have new weapons, new equipment. And it's random, but I control what is random and the pools that they pull that from, just by data. Nobody else have to do anything once we have set that up. And that's the kind of wishful thinking rationale that we use, that once a programmer have done something, they don't have to work on it again. But you know how it is with code. It's not really true, but at least that's the philosophy. And again, here I control a lot of things. Also, which animation sets are used. So you say this is a one-handed slash weapon. It calls upon that animation. This is also saying, oh, this weapon bit has an electrical component. It's automatically going to work when I call on that, just by some syntax. So I recommend really using this. Quests, again, all of the typifications. So think about, I mean, there's not so many variants. If you look at World of Warcraft, you have your kill quests, collect quests, etc., etc. I'll take that as simple examples. And I can control this also by data. So that means like if one of my quest types is broken, all of them are broken. And then I can intertwine that with local manipulable different types of quests. So the process is, I'm an advocate of practice, not of theory. So I had a saying there that some people argue that they are the same. So planning, we use clear phases and an incremental process. So for example, our team was working towards the Gamescom announcement with Biomutant. That's the only thing I'm talking about. And we'll take it from there. So that's in the phase we are, where we are right now with Biomutant. The game is going to be released next year, so we enter the next phase. So not try to think about what you're doing in 2 years when you're not close to even have hurdles on your way there. So my thing that I usually say, what are you doing this summer? And people can't answer that usually, even if there's 2 months left or something like that. So it's the same with game development. And then you have developers that ask you, what's the plan? Can I see the 1-year plan? Well, maybe it might change. Reverse planning. So how much time do you have? How many developers? What's your target to release? That's actually your first box. Block planning. I take that time and then I say, remember the feature boxes? I just put them into a block. That is kind of what I think, like, oh, this guy, he's really good at this, or he's a coder, or he's a discipline, and we try to block that out. The roadmap then. So in which order are we going to do these things? Because there might be dependencies, or we can't do a lot of these things until this one is done. So now I already have kind of the skeleton for a plan with these 3 simple things. And we use this a lot instead of just planning waterfall or sitting trying to figure out from a design document all of the feature as the producers. Like I said, we don't have a producer. And here's an example from Biomutant, the development roadmap. So you see on the left-hand side, the disciplines, and how I just simply, like a very simple form of structuring this. On the to the left from to the right, it's just like in time, these blocks of time. Can be a week, can be a month. In this case, it's a month. It's up to the project and how long it works. And this is actually how it works in practice for us. I call it Chaos Scrum. Over the course of 20 years, I've tried all of the different methodologies of planning. So this is an adapted version that we use. Like I said, we're all chaotic people. And it's quite simple. You see that you have, on the top, you can put 3 nodes. So every day you have 8 units. Think about them as hours. But 8 units is more about for us to balance the importance of each feature. You see beneath the line there, you have the rest of the week. So every Monday we do a stand-up where we plan 36 units. And you might say, oh, but a week is 40 hours. But we use the last one every Friday to play the game together as a team. So every day we redo this. We move nodes from the bottom to the top. And when we finish a task, we just put them to verify. And nobody's verifying until the end of the week. And then we verify all of the nodes together so that everybody has an understanding of the complete game. Doesn't matter what discipline you are. And I can speak about this a lot as well. So testing, focus testing. You hear a lot of this if you work with big publishers. And well, you kind of know what's wrong with your game at different stages. But I encourage to do this because it gives you an insight of how other players will interact with your game. So that's how I test things and the team tests things. So for example, this year we've been doing 4 tests for Biomutant, big tests with about 50 people, down to 10 people in the end, because we kind of knew where we're going. And it's all about user experience. We knew what was wrong. We're not trying to find bugs. We're trying to see how people interact. So the whole team is there watching over the shoulders. And then afterwards, we ask people to enter data. And I collate this. This is a 25-page document with the different feature sets because it gives you kind of verification for your assumption. So we ended up here, you see 73% average score. Like if you look at Metacritic, remember I come from AAA, so they always use this as a big thing. But for me, it's more about, yeah, I agree. This, the uniqueness of the world, it feels like an 8. Yeah, I think so. And then you can get some surprises. Like we had problems with variation in our combat system. We knew this, but we didn't know how much it would actually mean until we saw people choosing melee over shooting, for example, in that case, early. But in April, May, we already fixed that, so we could work on just iterating on that. Yeah, so I touched this briefly because I know that we have limited time, and I hope you got some valuable insights from this talk, even though it's short. As I said, I usually speak a lot about this more in depth. So if there's any questions, I think we have maybe 1 minute or not. Oh, I have 5 minutes. I usually am late always because I speak a lot. So if there's questions, let me know. If not, oh, there's one.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for your talk. You were very informative. So you said that you're a very visual person, but working solely on spreadsheets, it's not really visual for me. So you said that you can create a loot box from model, sound, loot inside, and all that stuff. Wouldn't that be easier or more visual to integrate that into the engine itself, so you can see what you're actually building, not only in spreadsheet?
It's actually integrated in the engine. Like I said, it's one-click import and it changes the game. So visually for me, what I mean by that, sorry, I didn't talk a lot about that because it's so natural for me. So we do a lot of, like you were asking about models, for example, we skip the concept art stage, for example, after I set the box. So I do original, like as few concepts as I can, and we take the really good developers and give them freedom. As an artist, you want to have creative freedom too. In a big team, you have a concept team. I will give you, and this is how I worked at Avalanche. We gave you really clear, as an artist, you got really clear instructions how to make that. But if I understand your question is more, why am I not construction, the loot box system, with maybe like they did in the development process of Zelda. I actually play the game and I go in and tweak things there because it takes shitloads of time. This is the most important thing for me. I told you about time. This is really easy for us, goes this quickly. And if you cannot like vision the effect of a loot drop system in your head, maybe you shouldn't work with those things. Does that make sense? Then you probably should take another guy. And this is what we do. A lot of us in the team at Biomutant, we're multidisciplined. That doesn't mean that we all do everybody does everything. But during the course of time, we're trying to figure out, well, you're really good at that actually. So we have programmers that are really good designers. So let them design.
Mm-hmm. So you can imagine that if you have really skillful people, then they can work on that level, on the spreadsheets, when they can visual everything. But that tool that you use is really good for skilled people, but for the less skilled people, it would be very hard wall to climb to came into it. But I suppose that's the price to pay.
Yeah, I think like you have to have, like in our team, it's likely that it's me or maybe two other guys, and they're both focused on code that do this. But I'm the only one actually editing these sheets. And I'm also held accountable for all the mistakes I make because it's data driven, right? So I can make mistakes, but then they are quite easy to spot. So I guess the other two guys, they keep me in check and find the errors that I make. Because 9 times out of 10, when something doesn't work in the game that is actually controlled by this data, I made a mistake, a simple mistake, like a space between two things or something like that. So I think that's my, I can give more insight in this, you know, in over the course of a couple of days, because it's not rocket science. It's more about, you know, designers sometimes, you know, I know everything and this is my document, you can read that, but interpersonal skills is much more important. Like when I speak to you, that's like a lot stronger than you reading a document. If I show you an image, that's a lot stronger than you reading a document, but it's even more strong if I speak to you. So for example, the team I led at Avalanche, I did videos of everything. So if you joined the team like 4 months in, you had to watch me for a week or something, videos of all the feature sets. And I used to edit that with footage from the gameplay, or also I stand on a whiteboard and I draw the mechanics. So again, no texts, no text documents. But I mean, it's so personal. Remember what I said? It's about the people. So you shouldn't enforce yourself, like use, oh yeah, they use this methodology, so we're going to use it too. Like I said, we are an investment company as well, or I'm part of that. So when I'm mentoring these teams or trying to give them my advice, my perspective, we're not saying, yeah, this is how you should do it. I'm just trying to give you like, oh, maybe you can get an idea that would work for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything else? Cool. Thanks so much for taking time listening to me.